So, the fourth dimension. I guess I have to explain it from the beginning. In order to get to the fourth dimension, I have to explain what it is and how we get there, and the dimensions before that, the first, second, and third dimensions. Because if you have no knowledge of the fourth dimension, you might think I mean something more like parallel universes, which is not what I mean. The fourth dimension is a realm that exists within, in, around our own dimension, where we are living, our planet, our universe, everything. So we live in the third dimension. That is the dimension we live in because we have 3 dimensions of axes that make up our universe and our lifestyles and everything we know. Those 3 dimensions are up and down, that's 1. Left and right, that's 2. And back and forth, that's 3. So, like take a cube, has height, has width, and then it has depth. Those are the 3 dimensions. So, in contrast, the second dimension consists of only 2 dimensions, up and down, left and right, a square. A square only has those 2 dimensions. So a square is a second dimensional object of a cube, and a cube is a third dimensional version of a square. And similarly, we can also understand the first dimension. Of course, it's only 1 dimension, it's up and down. That's pretty simple. So those are the dimensions. So hence, when you go see a movie and it's in 3D, it has that third dimension. That's what it means. It has that third dimension of access. It's not just 2D, it's not just a square, it's not just on the TV. It can come out at you because it has that extra third dimension. That's what that means when you see a movie in 3D. And I'm sure you've also heard of 2D objects, just the term 2D and 3D. And so when I say dimensions, I just mean the axis of movement. So there's the first, second, and third dimension, but what about the fourth dimension? Could there be a fourth dimension that we just can't perceive? It's possible. It's a common theory in science right now, and you can look up at far more advanced scientists that can explain this much better than I can. But I figure I'll just explain what I know and give my perspective and my view on it. That's what this video is for, is to give my knowledge and share my perspective on the matter. So the fourth dimension, we can't even comprehend it. What's interesting is you can actually look up pictures and videos of a third dimension shadow of a fourth dimensional cube, and it's very cool. It's hard to comprehend. It's like constantly like shifting in and out of itself and doing all kind of wacky things. But I highly recommend you check it out. And so that's essentially what the fourth dimension is. It'd be some kind of realm on top of our own existence that we can't comprehend or fathom or anything. Well, what's the point? Okay, so there's possibly a higher dimension on top of our own. What does it matter? Well, it doesn't really. You could go your whole life without ever understanding or even knowing of the fourth dimension. You'd be fine. In fact, millions of people have done that very thing. But it's interesting to think about and learn about. And let me share my knowledge of this extra dimension, which I find extremely interesting. Because to truly understand it, you have to take it a dimension down. And so take a piece of paper, which would represent the second dimension. Take a sphere. A sphere is a third dimensional object, right? Pass it through the paper. If you were a stick figure that lived on the paper, what would you see? You would see a small circle that would expand and then shrink again until it disappears. This is movement. You would see the circle moving because it's growing and shrinking. It's movement. And what is movement? Well, movement is just time. Because if there was no movement, if nothing could move, planets couldn't move or anything, everything was static, would time exist? We would have no frame of reference of saying, oh, that planet was here before it was here. That's what gives us a sense of time, is seeing things move, seeing things change over time, seeing things evolve. That is why the fourth dimension is time. Time is an illusion because it doesn't actually exist. All it is the fourth dimension, but we can't comprehend the fourth dimension. So when we see the fourth dimension at play, we aren't able to comprehend it. And so we make up time to help us understand it, understand what we're seeing. So that is how the fourth dimension is time, and how time is an illusion. Because all time is movement. All it is the fourth dimension interacting with our plane of existence, sending shapes and objects and materials and matter into our plane of existence. And as we see those things enter our realm, our third dimension, we see growth, we see change, we see movement, until eventually these things change and go away from our peripheral. They leave our third dimension. They're gone, right? And that's just how the fourth dimension works. It's constantly interacting with our third dimension. And we're constantly seeing how it's interacting with and changing and manipulating and growing our lifestyle. We are fourth dimensional beings because we can move, we can change, we can grow, we can become more, we can become better. But we live in the third dimension. So we may be a part of the fourth dimension, but we do not comprehend it. We live in the third dimension. That's what we know. That's where we live. That's where we thrive. And so on one hand, we can change and move and grow. But on the other hand, we live in the third dimension and we want to stay the same. We want to stay static. We don't want to change. We don't want to become better. And that's just human nature. Humans naturally want to stay the same. They don't want things to change. They want to live the same life day to day. We like what's familiar. That's why someone might stay in a toxic relationship, be stuck in a dead-end job. Because even though it's bad and we don't like it, and we may even hate it, we are scared of change. And so that's why we stay in that crappy dead-end job, why we stay in that toxic relationship. That's just human nature because we live in the third dimension. But we are fourth dimensional creatures, so naturally we are changing. And our world is fourth dimensional, so our world's constantly changing. And so we are creatures that don't like change, but we live in an ever-changing and ever-growing universe. And it doesn't add up, you know? And that's where a lot of challenges can come in, because we don't want the change. We don't like the change. We want to stay static. But in life, you have to accept the change. Life is akin to a river. A river flows. It constantly moves. Life is always moving. We don't like that. We want to get out of the river and change it, build a dam, stop the flow, make the river do what we want it to do. Sure, you can get out. Sure, you can build a dam. Sure, that'll stop the flow, but only temporarily. Give it a year, 2 years, 100 years, a millennium. Eventually, that river's going to break that dam and burst through and start flowing once again. You could never block the river forever. The river wants to flow because that's just nature. And so you can spend your time, exert energy to get out, build the dam to temporarily block it, where you'll only have to build the dam again in order to fit what you want. You can do that, sure. It's your life. But ultimately, that's only going to leave you with pain and struggle and frustration. Because no matter what you do, the river is always going to keep flowing. Or you can play life how life is going to play. You can flow down the river, accept that things will change, and go with the flow. And so, while you're flowing with the river, instead of trying to manipulate the river and stop the flow, that energy that you saved, you can now use that to just slightly alter your trajectory and then let the river take you where it's going to go. And that's the key in life. Don't constantly try to change what you can't change. Instead, change what you can change. Change yourself. Change your trajectory. The flow is akin to the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is what causes things to change. And so the fourth dimensional objects interacting with our third dimensional plane, that is the flow. These objects are flowing in and then out of our third dimension. You have to flow with those objects in order to achieve your goals and get what you want. You can't change the fourth dimension, of course, but you can understand it, you can realize it, and you can see it. You can see the patterns and tendencies, and you can understand it to the best of your ability so that you can then use it to your advantage instead of trying to change it. It's much easier to understand the fourth dimension and use it to your advantage than trying to change it. You're not going to be able to change it. It's a force of nature. It's going to seep into and out of our third dimension constantly. There's nothing you can do about that. And so trying to change it's pointless. You have to understand it and go with it and work with it. Use it to your advantage. That's how you change. That's how you grow. That's how you become better. That's how you achieve your goals. I've stated how it's multiple objects seeping into our plane. I don't think so. I think it's one shape. Our universe is one shape. And if you're able to see it in the fourth dimension, you would see a physical connection between everything and everyone. Because it's one shape. You just can't see it. We can't comprehend it. But it's one shape. And so everything's connected. You may ask, oh, but I'm not connected to some guy in China. Of course not. But consider this. Right now, me and that guy from China, we're not connected. But eventually, I will die and I will decompose and I will become part of the earth. I'll then bring about new life and I'll be a part of the earth, right? And the guy from China, similarly, he will also die and he'll also become part of the earth. He'll also decompose and he'll also be part of the earth. So now I'm part of the earth and he's part of the earth. Is that not a connection? So yes, we may not be connected right now, but eventually we will be. Because in the fourth dimension, we are connected. We just can't see it. I think about this, the same experiment with the circle passing through the paper. Let's change the circle though. Take a magnet, that U shape, put that through the paper. Now what do you see? You see two distinct, separate squares. They're two squares, right? They're not connected, right? Yeah, they're not connected. Not in this moment. But as the magnet goes further and goes through the paper, you see those squares grow closer and closer to each other until eventually they combine and now it's just one rectangle. Now they're connected. It's the same thing with everything and everyone in our universe. We were all connected. We just can't see it. But from the fourth dimension, we are connected. And so eventually I'll die, I'll decompose, same as that guy in China. Now we're both part of the earth. Now we're connected. And same with everyone else that's ever lived. Once I decompose, I'm now part of the earth, same as Abraham Lincoln. Me and him are now connected. We always have been. We just can't see it. And this shape, it doesn't change. The shape is the same. The shape isn't weaving together and changing as it's coming through our third dimension. Our universe is a sphere. It always has been, always will be. And as it passes through our dimension, we may only see half of it. But on the other side is not changing. There's only one shape, one outcome. That's why there is no free will, because it's the same shape. It always has been and it always will be. We just can't see what's coming because it hasn't crossed into our plane of existence yet. So that's why we may think that it can change, but in actuality, there is only one outcome, the rest of that sphere. So the lesson is use the rules and laws of the fourth dimension to our advantage, because then we don't have to work as hard, we don't have to worry about as much frustration. And that's the lesson behind the fourth dimension. Work smarter, not harder. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and giving us a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. And if you want more in depth, you can listen to our podcast. It's linked in the description, where me and my co-host go way more in depth about this and go off on plenty of side tangents. I think it's a good listen, so I highly recommend. And until next time, we are extensions of the universe.